It all started when I caught Karen sniffing my Amazon box like it owed her money. She was standing on my front porch in broad daylight, nose practically buried in the cardboard, muttering something about neighborhood safety and suspicious deliveries. I didn't even live in an HOA, she just self-appointed herself as the block's gatekeeper after watching too much daytime TV. When I opened the door, she jolted like I had slapped her with a subpoena. "Oh, I was just checking if it was mis-delivered," she said, eyes darting around like a shoplifter caught mid-grab. Her hand was still on the box. That package had my name, my address, and a giant sticker that said, "Personal Electronics, Fragile." So unless her last name was also mine and she moonlighted as my clone, there was no reality where this was hers. I calmly took the box from her fingers without saying a word, just raised an eyebrow high enough to qualify for liftoff and shut the door. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next week, 3 packages disappeared. Small stuff at first: a video game controller, a set of headphones, a custom mug that said, "World's okayest neighbor." I thought maybe the delivery guy was messing up. So I installed a camera on my porch. Not a fake one with a blinking red light, a real one, discreet, motion-activated, with enough night vision to catch a raccoon stealing your soul. The footage I got on day 4 made me do a double take. There she was, Karen in all her beige glory, squatting like a goblin beside my porch planter at 3 p.m., lifting the lid of a freshly delivered box, and casually sliding it into one of those fabric tote bags that only come in 2 settings: yoga mom or kleptomaniac. Then she looked directly at my doorbell camera, smiled, and waved. I didn't confront her immediately. That would have given her the satisfaction. People like Karen feed on drama the way toddlers feed on sugar: messy, manic, and unstoppable once they get going. Instead, I reported the theft to the police and the delivery company, submitted the footage, and waited. 3 days later, I came home to find a passive-aggressive note taped to my door that said, "If you're going to order things you don't need, maybe consider donating to people who do." It was written in pink glitter gel pen on monogrammed stationery that smelled like expired lavender. No signature. No need for one. I started getting creative. The next time I ordered something, I wrapped it in 3 layers of duct tape, sprayed it with a skunk scent deterrent I'd used once on a camping trip, spoiler, it works on bears but not on Karens, and wrote "used cat litter. Do not open" in Sharpie across the top. It arrived on a Wednesday. It was gone by Thursday morning. That's when it hit me. This woman wasn't just stealing for greed. She was stealing for control. It wasn't about the items. It was about reminding everyone that she could take what she wanted, when she wanted. It was a power move. A middle-aged dominance display wrapped in passive-aggressive smiles and unsolicited HOA newsletters. So I decided to take that power away. Enter Marvin. Marvin was my cousin's emotional support skunk, which was already a sentence no one expected to hear. Marvin was not technically legal to own in our state, but he was domesticated, declawed, and trained to spray on command, sort of like a very angry, black-and-white garden hose with a grudge. I made a call. Marvin was delivered to my house in a reinforced pet carrier, and seemed perfectly happy as long as I fed him boiled eggs and let him watch YouTube videos of other skunks. Then I built the box. I didn't just slap together a cardboard trap. I constructed it with love. Reinforced bottom, airflow vents, a magnetic latch, and a false lid. Inside, I put a plush pillow, a few egg bits, and a sensor trigger that opened the internal divider when the outer flap was disturbed. I labeled it, "Free Jewelry Samples, Prepaid." Delivery day was Friday. I set the box on my porch around 1 p.m., exactly when Karen usually walked her dog, which was code for patrolling the neighborhood like a mall cop with delusions of grandeur. I waited inside, watching through the camera feed like a patient Bond villain. Right on time, she approached. This time, she didn't even pretend to be hesitant. She looked both ways, reached down, and popped the lid. There was a moment, maybe half a second, of hesitation. Then a blur of fur, a mechanical click, and a deafening, high-pitched shriek that shattered the silence of the cul-de-sac. Marvin erupted like a skunk-shaped geyser. It was majestic. A foggy white and yellow mist blasted upward into Karen's face like a bouquet of revenge-flavored justice. She stumbled back, screeching, her arms windmilling as she tripped over my begonias and landed squarely on her back. Marvin, unbothered, waddled back into the box and curled up like he'd just clocked out of work. I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee and the most neutral face I could manage. "Oh hey Karen. Package for you." She rolled over, gasping, eyes watering, reeking like chemical warfare and expired onions. "You put an animal in a box?" I sipped. "I think you mean your box. You did open it." She stormed off screaming something about lawsuits and animal cruelty. I waved at her dog, which looked embarrassed to be associated with her. The next day, the police came. I invited them in, offered coffee, showed them the footage, and even let them meet Marvin. The officer laughed so hard he snorted and asked if Marvin took requests. I explained he was just trying to protect my property. They filed it as defensive deterrent against package theft, and advised me not to do it again. I promised I wouldn't. Marvin was already on his way back to my cousin, satisfied and well-fed. Karen? Karen disappeared for a while. Her lawn signs came down. Her flyers stopped. But I had a feeling it wasn't over. People like her don't retreat, they reload. And sure enough, 3 days later, my mailbox exploded. Figuratively. Not from a bomb, but with envelopes. Certified letters. Legal threats. HOA bylaws stapled together like manifestos. I didn't even have an HOA. She'd created one. From scratch. Just to try and control me. And that's when things really started getting foo. If there's one thing Karen loves more than her sense of authority, it's paperwork. Obsessive, bureaucratic, soul-crushing paperwork. So when I opened my mailbox and found a self-stamped packet titled, Founding Charter of the Willow Glen Property Integrity Association, I knew exactly whose desperate fingerprints were all over it. She had gone and made her own HOA. From scratch. With herself as interim executive chairwoman, whatever that meant. The paperwork included a newsletter, a bylaws booklet, a welcome packet, and, of course, a violation notice. For me. For intentional disruption of community wellness standards via animal-based entrapment. I stood on my porch, flipping through the documents like I was reading a menu in hell. She'd even included a hand-drawn map of our street, with my house circled in red ink and the word problem scribbled beside it. She had, apparently, convinced 4 of our more gullible neighbors, 3 retirees and a woman who thought the moon landing was fake, to sign on. That gave her just enough momentum to claim the whole block as a provisional governance zone. Which, to be clear, is not a real thing. But she made it sound real enough to scare the weak-willed. She put up signs at every corner. Welcome to Willow Glen, a community of standards. I passed one on the way to work, and it was crooked. The irony nearly caused a stroke. The next move came fast. I got a letter from the city claiming my house was under review for unregistered pet containment structures. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint that I was illegally harboring wildlife. She even attached stills from the video of Marvin launching his fragrant vengeance. I couldn't decide if I was impressed or insulted. Fortunately, the city inspector turned out to be a reasonable guy. He came out, saw the totally Marvin-free property, rolled his eyes and laughed. "This the Skunk Lady house?" he asked. I nodded. "You're the 3rd one this week. She tried to cite a guy for having unlevel hedges." He stamped the complaint closed and told me if Karen escalated, I should consider legal action. I told him I was already 3 spreadsheets deep into planning my next move. Because Karen didn't stop. She never does. Like a Roomba with a vendetta, she just keeps bouncing off walls until she finds a crack. Her next stunt was what really set the neighborhood ablaze. Literally. I came home one afternoon to find a group of confused kids standing on my lawn next to a small table covered in pamphlet Karen had set up an educational outreach booth on my property without asking. There was a banner: "Keep Willow Glen clean, say no to vermin-adjacent neighbors." A bowl of lemon water sat on the table, next to cookies shaped like little skunks with red excess over them. She was mid-speech when I walked up. "And some people think it's funny to use dangerous animals as weapons, but we know better, don't we?" The kids, all under 10, looked deeply uninterested. "Karen," I said evenly, "why are you on my lawn?" She turned with a smile so fake it should have come with a barcode. "Community outreach. Your front yard is the most visible location, and your lawn was so available. Did you just insult my landscaping? I'm offering constructive feedback. Get off my lawn. Children, let's all go do a safety walk," she chirped, herding them like confused ducklings toward the sidewalk. Once she was gone, I inspected the table. The cookies were from a store 3 blocks away, which she'd had delivered. Using my address, I made some calls. First to the bakery, where I confirmed the order had indeed been placed under the name Karen Whitmore, Community President, but billed and shipped to my house. Then to the neighborhood group chat, where I posted a photo of her outreach booth with the caption, "Today's lesson: never feed cookies to strangers without permission or legal standing." Reactions came fast. Laughing emojis. Eye-roll memes. Then a neighbor posted their own story. Karen had left a warning notice on their door about unauthorized wind chimes. Another neighbor chimed in. She'd tried to ban Halloween decorations unless they were historically accurate. By evening, I had enough screenshots to build a digital library of her chaos. But then came the real twist. I got a call from an unknown number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Michael, Regional Director of Community Associations International. Apparently, Karen had attempted to register her HOA officially and was trying to rope in properties using falsified neighborhood maps and misleading voter tallies. "She claims you're her vice president," he said. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. "I put a skunk in a box to keep her out of my packages. That's our relationship." He sighed. "That's what I figured. She's crossed several lines. We're initiating a review." 2 days later, Karen hosted a town hall meeting in her backyard. Or tried to. She dragged folding chairs onto the lawn, set up a Bluetooth speaker on a card table, and stood beneath a canopy labeled Willow Glen United. Only 6 people showed up. 1 was her dog. 2 others were there for free bottled water. She shouted into the mic about order, safety, and the decay of neighborhood decency. I showed up 5 minutes in with a USB drive and a portable projector. I didn't say a word, just plugged it into the speaker's power supply, pointed the projector at her garage door, and played a video compilation of Karen's greatest hits: package theft, cookie propaganda, anti-wind chime rhetoric. Each clip was carefully captioned and timestamped. The neighbors gasped. One guy actually applauded. Karen froze mid-sentence. "This is an illegal broadcast," she shrieked. "It's called freedom of information," I replied. "Maybe read the Constitution before founding a fake government." That's when her mic cut out. Her Bluetooth speaker, plugged into the same outlet as my projector, shut down. I gave her a polite nod and walked away, leaving the footage playing. The fallout was immediate. The neighbors left. Someone unplugged the table fan she'd brought. Another woman took back the bottled water she'd donated. Karen stood in the middle of her lawn, clutching her mic like a defeated game show host whose audience had voted with their feet. But it wasn't over. That night I found my porch egged. Not teenage prank style, this was strategic. 1 egg on the doormat. 1 on the doorbell. 1 on the package camera lens. It was quiet. Precise. Personal. She was escalating again. No more rules, no more fake bylaws. This was war. And if she wanted chaos, I was more than ready to give it to her. Because I had a delivery coming in the next morning, one she wouldn't dare touch. A package so foul, so hilarious, so undeniably me, it would bring this saga to a glorious boil. And for the first time, I was going to sign it with her name. The package arrived at 10:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. Right on schedule. It came in a nondescript brown box, medium size, nothing flashy. But inside? Inside was a masterpiece of chaotic artistry and passive-aggressive brilliance. See, I had spent the weekend designing what I affectionately called the Karen Trap 2.0. No Marvin this time. No animals. Just engineering, timing, and an unholy blend of ingredients from the darkest corners of the internet, and one sketchy bait shop on the edge of town. Inside the box was a sealed plastic container, double-lined with vacuum-sealed pouches filled with synthetic butyric acid, fermented shrimp paste, and a novelty fart powder, mix designed to activate on exposure to air. I'd labeled the inner container "Refund enclosed, urgent return requested," and added a fake invoice with her name and address. I used a shipping label printed from her fake HOA correspondence, so if anyone asked, it looked like a return package addressed to her. Technically, I wasn't mailing her anything. I was simply setting something down on my own porch, where she had a long, proven history of committing package theft. By noon, the trap was armed. I placed the box on my welcome mat, angled just right so my doorbell cam had a full view, then sat inside sipping tea and watching the live feed. At 12:38 p.m., there she was. Karen, wearing oversized sunglasses and a floral sun hat like she was headed to a garden party hosted by Satan. She marched up my walkway, looked around once, performing her usual fake surveillance sweep, and scooped up the box like she was rescuing it from danger. Her purse already had room. She slipped it in and waddled back down the path like she was smuggling a Faberge egg out of a museum. That's when the timer kicked in. See, the moment she tilted the box, a weighted switch inside triggered a small puncture in the interior pouch. Within 15 minutes, the chemical cocktail inside would begin to activate and expand. The acid wouldn't hurt her, but it would unleash an odor so pungent it could convince a skunk to flee in shame. Bonus: once opened, it was near impossible to wash out. It soaked into fabric. Hair. I didn't see her open it, of course. But I didn't have to. At 1:02 p.m., the neighborhood exploded with noise. A scream, high-pitched and primal, echoed down the block. A few neighbors came outside. I casually strolled out with a pair of clippers, pretending to trim my hedges. Down the street, Karen came bursting out of her garage like a banshee, clutching what was left of the package. She flung it into a trash can and staggered backward, retching and waving her arms. Her hat flew off. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose. Her mouth twisted into a grimace so violent it looked like her soul was trying to escape. She made the mistake of trying to hose herself down. The scent reacted to water. Within seconds, the runoff stained her blouse and made the odor even worse. A neighbor yelled from across the street, "Karen, did something die in there?" "No," she shrieked. "He did this. He poisoned me." "He who?" the neighbor asked, already backing away. Karen pointed a trembling hand at my house. I just gave a calm little wave. An hour later, 2 patrol cars pulled up. I invited the officers inside, just like last time. I had the whole video queued up, showed them the footage of her stealing the box, again, and explained, very reasonably, that it contained nothing illegal, just returned fishing bait and novelty prank materials. I even handed them the fake invoice with her name on it. One of the officers couldn't stop chuckling. "You're saying she stole a prank box meant for herself?" "Technically, she stole a returned item addressed to her. I'm just trying to respect her male preferences." Karen, meanwhile, was outside yelling about chemical warfare and demanding a full investigation. One officer asked if she had permission to take the box. Her only answer was a long, shrieking silence. No charges were filed. Again. But that wasn't the end. Because Karen, like mold in reality TV, thrives in the absence of consequences. By the next morning, she'd posted laminated flyers on every mailbox. "Beware of toxic neighbors," they said in bold red lettering with a picture of me, cropped badly from my Facebook, next to a warning about volatile substances, illegal behavior, and antisocial tendencies. She even stapled one to the community dog park sign. My face next to a fire hydrant. Classy. That afternoon, I walked around the neighborhood pulling them down. Not angrily. Calmly. Deliberately. One by one. With each flyer I removed, I waved at a different neighbor and said, "Karen's latest masterpiece, would you like it signed?" Most of them laughed. A few shook their heads. But one neighbor, Tom, a retired firefighter, stopped me. "You should go to the city council," he said. "This woman's been out of control for months. You're just the only one fighting back." "Council doesn't care," I said. "Maybe not," he replied. "But the press might." I hadn't considered that. Yet, that night I sent an anonymous tip to a local reporter who covered suburban nonsense with the seriousness of a crime drama. I included footage, screenshots, and links to Karen's fake HOA website, which, by the way, still had a donate button. Less than 24 hours later, a segment aired titled Skunk Wars, the suburban showdown you didn't know you needed. It featured blurred footage of Karen shrieking, interviews with confused neighbors, and a narrator who spoke with the dry amusement of a man who'd seen too much. The video went viral in our town. Comments poured in. "HOA Karen strikes again. This is why I live in the woods." I'd subscribed to this as a weekly series. But while the internet laughed, Karen fumed. She stormed over to my house the next morning, face still slightly greenish from lingering scent damage, and screamed at my door for a solid 5 minutes. I let her wear herself out before opening the door just enough to hand her a breath mint and close it again. 2 hours later, I got an envelope slipped under my door. It wasn't a flyer. It was a notice. Formal HOA disciplinary review, immediate hearing scheduled. She had scheduled a trial. At her house. For me. As a recognized violator of communal ethics. I almost admired the audacity. So I RSVP'd yes. I showed up on her lawn with a folding chair, a legal pad, and a fresh cup of coffee. 4 neighbors were already there, looking like they'd been lured under false pretenses. Karen stood at the front wearing a neck brace, unclear why, with a folder of papers clutched dramatically to her chest. "This hearing will now come to order," she declared. I raised a hand. "Point of procedure. How are jurors selected?" "They're appointed by the HOA Executive Board." "You mean you?" She didn't answer. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Then I'd like to call a witness." "Who?" she scoffed. I turned to the crowd. "Marvin." A pause. Karen's face paled. Of course Marvin wasn't there. But the moment she heard the name, she lost it. She screamed something incoherent about biohazards and domestic terrorism and tried to overturn my chair. When she stumbled and knocked over her own lemonade table, spilling yellow sticky liquid across her HOA documents, the crowd couldn't take it anymore. They laughed. Every single one. The illusion of authority shattered in real time. Karen picked up her papers, her pride, and what was left of her dignity, and stomped into the house, slamming the door behind her. Karen didn't come out of her house for 2 full days after the glitter box. Word on the street was that she'd tried to open it indoors and set off a spring-loaded explosion of confetti, glitter, and what someone later described as an entire Etsy store's worth of sequins. Her living room curtains, according to one particularly talkative neighbor, looked like they'd been sneezed on by a unicorn. Personally, I had nothing to do with that box, but I wasn't going to correct the rumors. Let her stew in the idea that any package could be another payload of poetic justice. By now, the neighborhood had made its choice. The tide had turned. People who had once politely smiled through her flyers and nodding HOA nonsense were now actively avoiding her. Some took their lawn chairs and started sitting closer to my side of the street during weekend walks. One particularly brave soul, Mrs. Jenkins from 2 houses down, put up a yard sign that said, "Willow Glen is not a cult," with the word cult in bright red letters. Karen retaliated by trying to pull it up, Jenkins filmed her. That video hit the local Facebook group and got over 400 shares in 24 hours. It was beautiful. But Karen wasn't finished. People like her never give up, they just burrow deeper into their own self-importance. That Saturday she launched Phase 2 of what she called the Neighborhood Restoration Initiative. It started with a block-wide email blast from her official HOA address demanding that all houses comply with new visual regulations: white curtains only, grass no taller than 1.5 inches, and tasteful decorations. Her exact words were, "No more flamingos, gnomes, or grotesque flag displays." I had a garden gnome flipping the bird, so I assumed she meant me. I responded by painting my gnome gold and giving him a crown. The next day, I received a warning notice duct-taped to my mailbox. Final reminder, it said in aggressive Times New Roman, non-compliant households may face community-imposed penalties, including social censure and corrective landscaping. I wasn't even mad. I was impressed by her choice of words. Corrective landscaping sounded like a threat issued by the CIA. At this point, I knew I had to end it. Not just react, not just counterattack, but shut the whole Karen empire down. And the key came from a surprising place. My phone rang and it was Tom, the retired firefighter, asking if I could meet him at the town library. When I arrived, he wasn't alone. 3 other neighbors were with him. 2 teachers and an older gentleman who used to be a civil engineer. They had paperwork. A lot of paperwork. One of the teachers had gone through the county archive and discovered that Willow Glen wasn't technically zoned for HOA control. It was too small and hadn't been included in the master zoning plan back in 1983. Legally speaking, no HOA, even a legitimate one, could govern our block. It got better. The civil engineer had reviewed the permits Karen used when she registered her so-called Property Integrity Association. Most were invalid. The signatures she submitted? 2 were from homeowners who had moved away 6 months ago. 1 was from a woman who passed away last year. She was not just overreaching. She was impersonating. That gave me an idea, one that required some professional muscle. So I reached out to a friend of mine from college who'd gone into real estate law. I emailed him everything: the fake documents, the neighborhood shift, the viral videos, even a photo of my glitter-covered garden gnome. He replied with 2 sentences: "I'm in. This is insane." The plan was simple: hit her with a cease and desist, then file a formal complaint with the city clerk, the zoning board, and the attorney general's office. All simultaneously. But first, I wanted a public reveal. One final twist of the knife. So we staged a community cleanup day, a completely real event, organized with flyers and lawn signs. Karen couldn't resist. She showed up in her beige pantsuit, clipboard in hand, trying to bark orders at people holding trash bags. "No, no, leaves go in the green bin. That's not HOA compliant," she kept yelling. "Greg, those gloves are not sanitary," she snapped at a teenager who was just trying to grab a soda can from the gutter. Then came the reveal. I stood in front of everyone with a megaphone, legally permitted, by the way, and said, "Before we finish today, there's something we all need to see." Behind me, Tom rolled out a folding table with a poster board display like it was a 5th-grade science fair. On it were the fake signatures, the zoning maps, the expired permits, and printed screenshots of Karen's emails with her fake titles. My lawyer friend, who had flown in for the day, stepped forward and read the cease and desist letter aloud, like he was announcing a contestant on a game show. Karen turned 3 different shades of purple. "You can't do this," she yelled, pointing wildly at the crowd. "You're all in violation of community ethics." "Which community?" someone shouted. "This isn't a real HOA," another added. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She took a step back, stumbled slightly, then threw her clipboard onto the grass with a dramatic clatter. "You're destroying everything I built." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed your own credibility. We're just sweeping up the glitter." A few people chuckled. One slow clap started in the back. She stormed off, back to her house, which now had 3 dead plants on the porch and a faded Willow Glen United flag hanging sideways. Her empire had crumbled. Publicly. Irrevocably. In the days that followed, things got weirdly quiet. No more flyers. No more laminated warnings. No more rogue HOA memos demanding my gnome's exile. The sign at the end of the street, her pride and joy, was taken down in the middle of the night. I didn't ask who did it. I didn't want to know. I got thank you notes. Actual handwritten thank you note. One was just a post-it that said, "About time. Steve." Someone dropped off cookies, and I'm 90% sure they weren't laced with skunk spray. Even Mrs. Jenkins offered me her old power washer to help clean egg residue off my porch. As for Karen? She was still in her house, blinds drawn, lawn untended. Rumor had it she'd tried to contact a local TV station to do a story about neighborhood corruption, but no one picked it up. The station had already run their story, and people weren't buying her version of events anymore. But I knew she wasn't done. Not really. People like her don't just fade. They wait. They brood. They plot. And judging by the very official-looking envelope that landed in my mailbox the next morning, one labeled Personal and Confidential, Legal Action Pending, Karen was about to try one last time. Poor Karen. She had no idea I'd already called her bluff. And I was about to end this. Permanently. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with an eagle that looked like it had seen better days. It reeked of self-importance and lavender perfume, Karen's signature scent of passive aggression. I held it like it might explode. Not because I was scared, but because anything coming from Karen's house had a 50-50 chance of being glitter-rigged or soaked in skunk trauma. Still, I opened it slowly over the trash can, just in case. Inside was a hand-typed letter titled, Formal Notification of Pending Civil Suit for Public Defamation, Character Assassination, and Personal Damages. It was 4 pages long, single-spaced, and absolutely dripping with legal-sounding nonsense. She referred to herself as Chairwoman Emeritus of the Willow Glen Enforcement Council, and me as a rogue actor exhibiting patterns of sociopathic rebellion. She accused me of weaponizing the internet, emotionally destabilizing the community, and launching olfactory warfare. Then came the kicker. She was demanding $3,500 in damages. For emotional distress. And dry cleaning. I read the whole thing 3 times, laughed out loud once, and then called my lawyer friend. "Please tell me you kept the video of her stealing the package with Marvin in it," he said. "Oh, I've got it in 4K, I said. We filed a formal counterclaim within 24 hours, attaching all the video evidence, neighbor statements, the zoning documents, and a notarized affidavit from Mrs. Jenkins that included the phrase, "She's nuttier than a squirrel in a power box." We sent a copy to the city, the county court, and Karen herself, with a tracking number and signature confirmation. I even enclosed a scratch-and-sniff sticker that said, "You've been served." Then I waited. Karen didn't show her face for 3 days. But I knew something was coming. The calm before the tantrum. On the 4th day, it arrived in the form of a local news van pulling into the cul-de-sac. Karen had called the press. Not the good kind. Not the channel that had already roasted her in the Skunk Wars segment. This was one of those desperate late-night stations that usually aired blurry UFO footage and ads for legal mushroom gummies. Still, a reporter climbed out with a mic and a fake smile. He headed straight for Karen's lawn, where she had set up a makeshift podium with her HOA banner duct-taped to a stack of recycling bins. She was wearing pearls and a navy blazer over gym shorts. It was chaos couture. I watched from my porch with a cup of coffee in one hand and a Bluetooth speaker in the other. As the reporter began filming her rant about neighborhood terrorism and biological sabotage, I quietly turned up the volume on my speaker and played an audio recording of her screaming during the skunk incident. Loud. On loop. Her voice, high and panicked, echoed across the street. "Oh my God, it's spraying me." The camera jerked toward my house. Karen froze. The reporter blinked. I gave a small wave. Karen launched into a second meltdown, screaming that I was violating her rights, calling me a domestic extremist with a gnome army, and finally grabbing the mic to shout, "This is my neighborhood." At that moment, 3 neighbors walked by in matching t-shirts that said, "Willow Glen, now 100% HOA free." The camera kept rolling. The segment aired later that night under the title, Suburb Showdown, Karen vs. Everyone. It wasn't flattering. My doorbell cam footage played in the background while the anchor read aloud parts of her olfactory warfare letter. By morning, the video had over 80,000 views and a comment section that could best be described as gleefully brutal. But here's where the final twist came in. A week later, a man in a navy blazer and khakis knocked on Karen's door. He wasn't from the media. He was from the state attorney general's office. Turns out, submitting forged documents to register a fake HOA and misrepresenting zoning authority to multiple residents, while soliciting donations under false pretenses, constitutes fraud. Real, legal, take-your-purse-and-go-to-court fraud. Karen was served. Not by me. By the state. She tried to pretend it was a mistake, claimed the signatures were symbolic, and that the HOA was spiritually binding but not legally enforced. She argued that emotional leadership didn't require government oversight. I swear, if delusion was a currency, Karen could have bought out Amazon. The Attorney General wasn't impressed. The investigation took about a month. During that time, I mostly kept quiet. Let her flail. Let her post weird flyers and scream at clouds. But behind the scenes, I was working with several neighbors to make something better. On the first weekend of the next month, we hosted the Willow Glen Freedom Barbecue. Open to everyone. No dues. No rules. Just food, music, and people finally exhaling. We held it on the sidewalk right in front of Karen's house. I set up the grill. Jenkins brought cookies. Even Tom played guitar. Someone made Free Marvin t-shirts as a joke. Karen watched from her window, pale and tight-lipped. She didn't come out. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Moving van. For sale sign. Silent exit. No goodbyes. No flyers. Just a single piece of paper taped to her door that read, "Property removed from HOA registry." We threw a party. We renamed the old clubhouse, the one Karen kept trying to convert into an enforcement office. It's now the Willow Glen Community Garden. No bylaws. No committees. Just vegetables, laughter, and a painted statue of a golden garden gnome in the center, wearing a crown and holding a scroll. The scroll reads, "Stay petty, my friends." As for me, I kept the glittery cease and desist letter. Framed it. Right next to my porch cam monitor. The truth is, I never set out to be the hero. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted my mail. But when someone turns your porch into their kingdom and your packages into their property, you either roll over, or you get creative. And when creativity smells like justice and skunk spray, well, that's just karma with a little extra seasoning. So, the next time you see a box on someone's porch, remember, it might not be for you. And even if it is, maybe, just maybe, it's best not to open what doesn't belong to you. Especially in this neighborhood. Especially if Marvin's involved.